And so we were really thrilled to celebrate Banned Books Week with our good friends at Raleigh, North Carolina, and I will pass it over to Ready.
One thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is dreaming. And I dream a lot in my sleep, and sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. But lately I've been in spaces where I've been dreaming about a future that is not today, it's not yesterday. And what that dreaming allows me to do is think about beyond the attacks. To think about beyond the systems that continue to put us in these positions year after year. But I also think about those futures where our community becomes elders. Our Black and brown communities, our trans and queer communities, where our kids get to grow up and dream of a future that has so much space for them. A lot of the books that are on, a lot of the books that are on the list or that any of our panelists might think about, or any that you saw yourself reflected or in that or recently, continue to urge us to dream. So I want us to think about that, to think beyond the systems that often try to hold us back, to move beyond the need of thriving or resilient in the first place as a community, to think about that future that is so far beyond, that has so much space for you and me and every part of who we are. So I encourage you to think through that while we welcome our amazing, incredible panel tonight, led by the one and only Tamika Walker-Kelly. Y'all come on up, take your seats.
So Gavin, you work for the Public Library System in Durham. Shout out to the team floor. Okay. So from your perspective, how do you offer safe space in your community for students through your, through the way that you operate the library to uphold making sure that students have access to a variety of books as well, and making it accessible to all of the people in the community as well?
So this is kind of a multi-part question, or maybe I have a multi-part answer. So in terms of the space, like the space itself, I'll get to the people in the space later. We have things in the space like bookmarks that one of my colleagues created that have an identity flag on the front and then a list of books with characters with that experience, that identity on the back. And they're just out on display with all of the other book lists that we have. But when people ask for bookmarks and I point them to it, like there's so many like excited gasps, which is my favorite. We do displays for Pride, and I like to do queer displays not during Pride, because we're queer and trans all the time. So a lot of that is incorporating people of different, or characters of different abilities, races, ethnic backgrounds, genders, sexualities in every display, so that it's not like, okay, here's your month, here's your time. It's like it's always your time. And I think in some ways, I may have a little bit more freedom as a public librarian. We have not been hit yet with the same kind of restrictions that some school libraries have, like SB 49. You know about this bill, the Parent Bill of Rights in North Carolina. One element of it is that it gives parents access to their child's reading history from school libraries, but you don't have to do.
I said, which we would never do.
Oh, yeah. So, we're not doing that either. I mean, we're not a school library, but like, either way, sometimes I'm like, break the rules. But also, part of why I was drawn to librarianship in the first place, is that I am a person who is kind of like visibly queer, visibly trans, or visibly like something is going on with that person. Like one of these things is not like the other. And people who like youth who are also queer, also trans, also neurodivergent, like they see it. And it doesn't even have to be like a spoken thing. People like teens will come up to me and be like, I like your pins. And I'm like, thanks, I'm gay too. So like part of it for me is I'm a way that the space is welcoming, because I am an openly, joyfully trans person, who has made it to adulthood and is, for all intents and purposes, thriving. And I get to be like the mirror or the window or the sliding glass door. We love Rudine Sims Bishop, who originated those ideas. So cool. So like, I want to show teens that like they have a future, and it's like something tangible and visible. I don't think I knew what it was to be trans until I was in college. And I think that it's critical work that we're doing. And it is angry and it is joyful, and being able to like be that visually for people, and also be able to put books in their hands that say like, you're that too. Yeah, that's the best part of the job.
We love it.
I hope that answers the question.
It does. So, I mean, our libraries, whether they're school libraries or public libraries, are such a center of the community, just like our schools are. And all people from all walks of life cross there and they utilize it. And so the way that you use your positions is really critical to affirming students as they are coming into their whole humanhood, right? And that's really important. So Paloma, next question for you. Well, we're gonna switch gears. We're gonna get into the angry part of the joyful resistance. We're gonna get into the angry part. But as a student, how have you been feeling, listening to the conversation around book banning in schools? How does it feel to hear people externally challenging books that hold meaning to you?
So our school is a small charter school. We don't have a library at our school. So when these laws are like, well, these sorts of books shouldn't be found at schools, that it will likely be that they weren't going to be at our school anyways. However, being at a charter school and like my school that I distributed to is different. I have friends from all over the area who do have school libraries and who do utilize those. And they're not just spaces to get books from, but also there's spaces of community within the school and like places where they can find friends and supporting adults. And I don't want to see those spaces under attack, because I'm thinking of not just the kids who see those libraries as safe spaces, but the kids who are only just now daring to go into the library and who maybe don't read often, but they take that step and all of a sudden the books they have are limited. And I feel like that'd be discouraging for me if I was like getting into reading. And especially if I was, as a queer person, if I was getting into reading and then just being like, the only options I have are very specific narratives that I just don't relate to, I would be like, why would I read this? I don't see the appeal of it. And then, like Julie said, we have kids who just could be reading, could be getting that benefit from reading and aren't. And it affects everybody, and affects their futures, and affects our futures. And it's really disheartening. And it's like, I'm the leader for Schools QSA, and we've been keeping track of all the bills that the Aquinas General Assembly is looking at and passing, and it's like scary. Like every day it feels like the chance that we meet again could be less and less, and I don't want that. I want our QSA to be a safe space, and I want us to be able to survive and to thrive, and to not fear that our stories are just not going to be told.
So, Julie, as you cultivate a collection in your school, what do you hear from students when they bring in the conversations about what they can and cannot read?
Well, they know they can read anything. In our space, so it's more like, I used to be in Wake County. I'm not in Wake County anymore, but I spoke at several board meetings. And so I was like, there was a response on Twitter in regards to my comments. And so some students had seen those, right? And they came in, the response was more like, yeah, well, thank you. I don't mean that to sound like I saved your way. I mean to sound like, again, I don't think I'm answering your question. It's not that I want my students not to think about what's happening outside, but if I focus on that in the library, it's like they've won. So I really don't bring it into the school day. I keep doing what I'm doing. And the reason I went with this to Gavin, thinking about school libraries, every school library, are there any school librarians in the room? Okay, so every school librarian, like we know, no matter what law is passed, right, there are ways around it to protect our students that we will do 100%. And your school librarians, a lot of times we feel alone. Usually we're the only one in the building, right? Like Gavin, it would be so cool to be in a public library. Right? You work with other librarians. It's super cool. We're usually all alone. And so even just like an email from a family member or community member saying, I love how your collection reflects our students or reflects the global majority. CC the principal. Like that matters so much. I realize that I carry white cis privilege into spaces I inhabit, and if I can weaponize it, I will, right? So I feel comfortable, and I don't feel comfortable speaking at board meetings, but I'm willing to do it. And I know for some people that's not safe, right? So I'll never say, well, everyone should be going to a school board meeting or their public library meeting, because I know that's not a reality for so many people. But I think there's other ways that we can be just as supportive, and helping your school librarians feel not alone would be huge.
Thank you for that. And yes, sometimes you don't have to go to the school board meeting. You can just write a public comment. Okay, you just go to the little portal and sign up, say all your words, because they definitely say all of theirs. So, the question is, so a follow-up question. Yeah, so in your classroom, you do a lot of exposure for students, right? So they can continue to learn the language of how they want to interact and identify themselves. But we do know that the challenges that a lot of groups are challenging books and instructional material and other curricular material that we could use in the classroom. And so when you think about supporting even our youngest students at school, what do you think that the community could do in order to help ensure that they have access to stories and histories?
Ooh, that's a lot. So I think I would answer it in two ways, kind of. One, I think that it's important that we utilize the programming, the events that the public libraries are hosting every month, every whatever, Rainbow Collective for Change, we do a lot of events at the library, like story times, and that's simply just exposing the community, whether you're in the LGBTQ community or not, to different types of books that resonate under the LGBTQ plus community. So that is a way for people to be connected to these stories, have those mirrors, have those windows, but there is not necessarily in the school. And then I think it's also important to support local bookstores, local people who are book curators, people who are knowledgeable about books, and really having conversations about things that we're interested in. So if I find a book like All Boys Aren't Blue, I'm going to tell my brother or some friends of mine, y'all should read this book because it shows us, it gives us an example of what it's like to be Black in the LGBTQ community. So just having conversations around books, but also participating in the events that are presented to us because that could possibly be taken away.
So Gavin, question. So, we've talked about different ways that the community can support librarians. And so I was on the Banned Books website earlier this week, and they were like, if you got 30 minutes, you could go to your public library and check out a book to make sure that it stays in circulation. Like, what are other tangible ways that the community can show support to the public libraries, like Julie talked about supporting school libraries?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind for me is tell our admin that you like seeing a wide array of experiences on the shelf. It can be, like Julie said, writing an email. We have, a lot of libraries have like a comment form on their website. Or when you're checking out your book at circulation, you can tell one of the librarians there and say like, will you pass this on to whomever? Because a lot of times I think sometimes admin, they don't work front of house. Like they're not always in public facing positions to see the kind of interactions that I might have with a team or a family who is excited about what I have there. So, and especially with public libraries, sometimes it's, there's like political stuff going on, and it does like constituencies do come into play sometimes. So I would say being vocal about what you like that's going on. I would say voting is a key way to keep libraries in funding and signify to representatives that libraries and access to information, intellectual freedom are important to you. And sometimes just like telling your librarian that you like what they're doing is like the best thing. Sometimes it can be a struggle on some days, I guess. Being a public librarian is sometimes adjacent to a kind of social work. And there, as much joy as I see, it's also, there was one time when a team was in the library with their parents, and when their parents went to another section, the team came up and asked me if I had any books like Darius the Great is Not Okay, that are not obviously, because it's not safe to read that at home. I then made a book list called Under the Radar, so people can read them and see books that are like stealthy queer if they need that. But it's that kind of thing. It's like I will sneak you what you need if that is what it takes. Like, and just saying like, heck yeah, public librarian, I see what you're doing, I support it, is huge too. I think that's what I want to say.
We love it. Okay, so I think this is maybe the last question because we want to end on a joyful note. So, Julie, if you could pick any book that has been banned or recently challenged that you think people should read. Just one. Just one. I know you got a whole collection, but just one. What book would you recommend?
Can I do one fiction, one nonfiction?
Yes,
I'm gonna give a shout out for a book that's there on the table. It's a beautiful collection, meanwhile, that's curated there. I don't know who did it. If you did it in this room, raise your hand. Felix Ever After by Casey Calendar is such a beautiful, powerful, tender book. There's so many things I love about it. Even the cover clearly shows the main character has had top surgery. I can't think of another cover. Definitely when Felix Ever After came out, and students noticed that. And it's just beautiful, and Case and Calendar, they're amazing. Everything they write is amazing. Felix Ever After is probably one of my favorite realistic fiction books. And my nonfiction plug is for Queer Ducks by Elliot Schrafer, which is a book like Felix Ever After that every single person should read. But it is how we have been lied to about the behaviors of animals. And there's over 1,500 documented studies of queer behavior in animals. And it's a beautiful, like fun, lighthearted read. So highly recommend.
See, people got their notes. They get ready to get their reading list together. Okay, can you repeat the titles of your two books one more time?
Gladly. Felix Ever After by Jason Calendar.
Just back here on tape.
Back here, it's thrown with like the orangey cover. It's gorgeous. And Queer Ducks by Elliot Schrafer.
I see
Both queer authors, of course. Both beautiful.
Thank you. I see a lot of typing, people getting their Amazon list together. You know, you got a love-hate relationship with Amazon too. Awesome. What book would you recommend?
This is a hefty task. I think most recently on my mind is a book I was telling Julie about called The Mercies by had the name
Kristen Hart.
Kieran Millwood. Yeah. And it is a book. It's a historical fiction book set on an island, I think, which is what is now Norway, in which all of the men were killed in a storm. And now the town is a group of women and young children, and they're independent. And the government doesn't love that, so they send a person to like re-Christianize the community. And it's also a queer love story, and it just like really spoke to me. And I'm learning about European history in class right now, so it's like maybe that's why I was like really into it.
Shout out to the ELA. We love it. All right, Gavin, what is your book recommendation?
This is like such a borderline rude question to ask the librarian. Like, I was on the way here. I was like, oh, we're good. It's fine. I was like in my car, like listing authors, I was like, okay, I'm gonna just shout these authors' names at everyone. But I can't do that.
I mean, you could. Do this first and then do that.
Okay, so I would say most recent YA novel that I read and was like, woof, is by Andrew Joseph White. It is his first novel. It's called Hell Followed With Us. And it has a beautiful cast of characters and messy and flawed in a post-apocalyptic time, where I'm not going to tell you the whole book, but this alt-right Christian group has developed a vaccine because they think it's their goal to like wipe out humanity. Anyway, the main character is trans, and there's like religious trauma, body horror, queer trans kids saving each other. And Andrew Joseph White says he writes for the angry trans kids. And sometimes I think we don't have enough of that. Like, yeah, be angry, like that's valid. But it's also like exuberant at the same time. So that would be my one.
Okay. Now shout out your list of authors you think we should be tapping into.
Okay, I mean, I will. I was gonna say Case Encounter because Felix Ever After gave me words for myself that I didn't have before I read it. I would say Mason Deaver. Love Mason Deaver. Aiden Thomas, Anne-Marie McLemore. I thought of more, but they're escaping me right now.
Okay, people are gonna come find you.
But those are some good ones. Yes. I always love doing readers advisory, so come find me.
Gavin is your person. Okay, for a curated list of books. Khalid.
I just got off work, so I'm really like toddler brain right now. So I'm thinking of like kid-friendly books.
Also take it.
When Adrian becomes a brother, or Aiden becomes a brother. I love that book. I feel like it really like I felt seen in that book because I wasn't in a safe space to really come out that young. So the book describes a AVAB or assigned female at birth child who is discovering himself and coming along on his transition. And as he's coming along with his transition, his parents get pregnant and are having a child, about to have a child, and he's going through like this experience of like, oh, well, what if the child doesn't like me? What if the child doesn't like pink? I hope it's pink enough. I hope it's blue enough. And I think it really like breaks down just transness to a way that toddlers and children under the age of like 7 can understand what transness is. And then I think of Julian is a Mermaid. And I feel like both of those books allow representation for the intersectionality piece and show like it's okay to be Black and in the LGBTQ community because it's rare that you find supportive families within the BIPOC community. So I really love those books as a teacher and as a human being.
Oh, we love that. We love that. So thank you all for those recommendations. And thank you so much for recommending a range of books from nonfiction to children's books, because all of our humans for our students on the age spectrum all deserve representation in their books, right? We just heard recently some of the children's books have been banned. I mean, like Hair Love was one of my favorite books, and to hear that Hair Love was banned in certain schools, like we talking about the way that things grow from people's heads. And kids can't read that because they feel a certain type of way. Remember, we have to do things for students. We are not here for the comfort of adults.
Right, yeah.
So while y'all are clapping, give it up for this amazing panel here. They did a magnificent job of sharing their perspectives and their experiences and their hopes and dreams and desires for students and educators, LGBTQ plus, students of color, and the intersections in between. Now we have Q&A this evening. We're so excited. All right, you are good.
We will start with Zoom questions.
All right, so we have a question from Zoom.
I Zoom.
If we have time, would the panelists be able to go into more detail about the effects of HB 49 and what is brewing on the horizon? I would also love to hear what we can do to advance positive changes in literary freedom.
I can take that one to start anyway. Because I printed HB 49 and brought it in. So a lot of it is so I'm speaking with representing myself only. A lot of it is to strip youth of their agency and put it into the hands of their parents at school, at home, in third spaces. So there's a lot about it gives parents the right to make all healthcare decisions for the child. They get to determine if the child has access to sex education or what kinds of textbooks the child has. It's like puts the parents in charge of a youth's education rather than education experts, people who have degrees in educating and specialized experience with youth. And one big thing is that let me find my highlighted portion. Okay, this is the part that stands out to me. Instruction on gender identity, sexual activity, or sexuality shall not be included in the curriculum provided in grades kindergarten through fourth grade, regardless of whether the information is provided by school personnel or third parties. So there's like formative years of young people's lives where they some are already starting to ask questions about themselves and to develop certainties about themselves, maybe that they are going to have a harder time understanding because they are not being shown words that resonate with them. That relatedly, HB 808 was passed recently, and that there's no more gender affirming care for minors in North Carolina at all, unless they were like already on a treatment. But moving forward, that's no longer a thing. I would encourage everyone to look up those bills, SB 49 and HB 808, and lobby in whatever way you can. I feel like there was a second part to that question. I'm sorry. I got really like heated.
Oh, wait, no, it was, something related to how, I'd love to hear what we can do to advance positive change in literary frequency.
So for me, this bill is terrifying. I remember when I was at my old school and I was just discovering my identity, and I was having a challenge with whether or not I was going to come out to my director and other teachers at the school, if I was going to come out to really anybody, but specifically at school. And my biggest fear was, will my trans identity overpower my identity as an educator? Will people make assumptions about me once I tell them that I'm trans, and then remove my ability to be an educator after they find out that information? And I think that this bill just kind of pushes that fear a little bit more, because it's hard for me to have conversations about myself with my students if I'm not able to talk about gender identity, race, whatever is in the bill. I don't care. But it prevents me from being able to have conversations about who I am, and that it's just hard as an educator to come into conversations. And toddlers are very curious about, are you a boy or girl? That's probably like the first question that they're gonna ask really anybody that they come in contact with. And the way that I answer it now is way more in depth than I can answer it if and when it has. Well, like when this bill comes into effect, how am I supposed to answer that question so that I'm not giving them too much information, I'm not exposing them to too much, et cetera, et cetera. But I think one of the portions of this bill that is another fear of mine is the intentional outing of children. Yeah. And like, if a child comes to me, whether they're a toddler or older, and they have a conversation with me about their identity, about their sexual orientation, it's my job as an educator to then go tell their parents or have conversations with the parents about those things. And I feel like that just hinders a lot of these children, will hinder a lot of the individuals from coming out, because there's no real safe space. They have nobody that they can go to school and not be stressed out. Oh, is my parents gonna find out? Is my grown-up gonna find out if I tell Khalid about my identity or whatever? So I think this bill is crap. I think that they just need to do a better job of really trying to understand children at the end of the day, because you're really hindering them from being able to grow up and be happy at the end of the day. And I think like that sucks. Yeah.
And I think as educators, we can come together and say, we're not doing it, right? Like there's power, as Tamika can talk about better than anyone else, right? There's power together. We're not going to do it. We're not going to expose a kid to their family. I did want to say something really quick about like how we can improve literacy and access. And it's by, in our spheres, because everyone in this room has like a sphere of influence, right? We have family and friends and people you work with. I think we have to be really careful about the language we use, and we can like gently call people in. Like one example is people will call some of these beautiful books on the table controversial books. And if you hear that, say, oh, those books aren't controversial. People are trying to turn them into a controversy, right? It's completely different, because if we call a book controversial, right? If someone calls Felix Ever After controversial, they're calling that beautiful protagonist controversial, right? And a human being is not controversial. Right? So I think that's one thing. Oh, you mean the groups, like the hate-filled groups that are like creating a controversy about that book? Oh, them, right? And to like gently push back. You'll notice these other hate-filled groups, they always say child, right? They don't say student, because they want us to think it's like a 4-year-old, right? That is reading gender, right? Instead of like an age-fit book. And that's another one is when people use the term, I've stopped saying, you know, when I first became a librarian, I would say age inappropriate. I've stopped saying that, because inappropriate is like applying some kind of value to the books. I always say good age fit. So that's another thing, just in your own sphere, doing little things like that. And then when they hear those hate-filled groups saying something, it'll click in their minds, and they'll remember what you had like gently called them on.
Can I amend one thing I said? I want to amend one thing that I said, after, listening to Kalik. I encouraged everyone to read these bills. What I would like to say instead is I encourage you to take care of yourselves and of each other, before anything else. So.
Who else has a question for our lovely panelists tonight? Okay.
Here's a question. I've been looking at this whole thing from the Senate hearings all the way down, and the gotcha statements, or not, the gotcha thing is when they read the nasty things and they want to turn you on and shock. So do you have a way to, because they do this what count, I saw it in the Senate hearing, they use this look thing, you know, and find those those pieces. So what is it that to get past that, since we know there's more than 2 paragraphs in a book? So how do we get turned that around?
That's a good question. Can you ask that question one more time?
Okay. I'm looking for a way to turn around, because right now, everybody's saying they read these things and they're, you know, asking people to leave meetings because they vulgar or whatever it is. It's a gotcha. You know, they're doing it on purpose to get it thrown in so they can get more media attention. I saw it in the Senate hearing where this, you know, the US Senate, they were reading books and they were trying to horrify people about what they were reading. You know, I'm thinking not every book needs to be read out loud. You know, that's, I don't read every book out loud, but what is a way to, because that is the big stick all across the US that they're using in school board meetings and libraries and whatever else. If you can't say it out loud, why is it to be let it be in the school library or in the public library? So what's the stick to come back with it? Well, when you find out, let me know.
I have a thought, but I feel like I'm talking too much, so.
Same. I don't got it.
You guys have to say, you know,
You were gonna say something.
Okay. How would I respond? I think it's really important to know that yes, they are taking out segments of books in order to invoke an emotional response or, you know, to employ shock value, right? And I think it's really important for us to talk about stories in complete context, right? And so when we go to the school board meetings or when we go to any other hearings and they're talking about this pornographic, you know, like they say, oh, this is pornographic and all that stuff like that. I like to leave with what the value is of a book to students. And it equips students, many books equip students with language, right? To see themselves and to tell their own stories. Many books allow students to reflect back experiences. And also many books allow students to see experiences that they would never have had before if they didn't have an opportunity to put their hands on a book, right? And so part of the response, and I talk as an educator, is also to call it out. Like, what happened 2 pages beforehand and what happened 2 pages after? You know, what is the data on this book? Is it being checked out a lot? Because sometimes they'll pull out books that kids haven't read in like 10 years, right? Because it's not the current reality. And so I think a lot of times, sometimes you don't fight negativity with negativity. Sometimes you have to fight it with positivity, and you have to lead with what these books say to the students who need them the most.
I love that. I think that we should go, and our response is to read a paragraph from that same book that showcases its beautiful writing, right? And then also I would say, positive statements from students, which I did as a school board once. It's such a sad reality that students have the most powerful voices, but I would feel unsafe having a student speak at like a Wake County School Board meeting when Moms with Liberty is always there in mass. I am a poor substitute, but like reading student comments. So if you are a student or there's a student that lives in your house, sharing those via email to your school board would be really powerful.
Thank you. This is for the educators on the panel, but in the 2021-2022 school year, almost more than half the book challenges were made by just 11 people across this country.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what can we do to be better organized? Because they're organized, right? And they're getting this done. And so how do we counter that, like in a more organized way as opposed to a one-off, where we're going to our school board meetings, but actually become organized in the same way that they are?
I know you do.
This is the nationwide database of all the books they've gone through. I think with AI and pulled out most of them. And this is where they come from. People are not reading. I want a lawsuit against these people on the national level to go across because these things are keeping good literature out of the hands of students based on race, based on gender, based on whatever else. But it's a national thing, and it's like you said, it should not be school board by school board. But it's out there. There's even a company that you can buy a website like this, and they'll go through your Destiny or your Fallout or whatever to pull out all the books, so people don't even have to find them or do anything with them. So I want that exposure.
There are large trade development school boards in North Carolina. There are several groups that are pulling together, that are pulling together, and they're going to different school board meetings, and it's beautiful because now you're hearing stories, you're hearing students talk, you're hearing other people. So there are like-minded people in every county in the state, and look out there because it's growing and it's wonderful.
So every library has a video they wouldn't see me on about books. Every library has a video that they're movie that they're putting together about students speaking out about banned books that they read and how wonderful they are.
Yeah, I would just say, shameless plug, as NCAE, we are a organization, I like to call it wall to wall, but we have every classification of public school educators, and we have what we call our community allies. And our community allies, like regular community people like you who love public schools, right? Can go and represent at school board meetings. But the thing is, like, they have found each other and they have organized themselves and they have a mission and a goal. And we have to find each other too in spaces like these. And we have to show up with a mission and a goal. And our mission and our goal is to make sure that every single child who enters a school building has a welcoming and affirming space. And we have to make sure that we say that every time we show up in places. And it's really important that we talk to each other and coordinate about what is happening in our areas. Because a lot of times you think it's just happening to you. And it's not. It's happening in other places too, both urban and rural. And large and small. So just like they are strategizing, mobilizing, organizing, we have to be about the same business too. And a lot of times as educators, there are limitations to what we can and cannot do. but y'all don't have that same issue. And we need y'all to go out and stand with work with us. And also sometimes you need people to stand in front of us. And then like Julie said, there are the attacks on books that we see are on characters that are Black and brown, queer. And so if you are in a position of privilege, your voice means a lot to be out in front. Because the harm has already been done to those of us who are Black, brown, and LGBTQ plus. And so we need more people who benefit from it, even though they may not be of the community. Because these books don't just affirm us, they really help affirm everybody in their sense of community and place in the world. And what would we do if we didn't have community? And so that is what we have to be doing, is organizing with the same intensity that they are.
And they're great literature, right? Right? I mean, we're keeping out the great stories. I mean, and it's like most basic and beautiful, great literature.
All right. We got one question. We're gonna slide this in with her and see who the
Hello. So pretty much as more of these materials are being challenged and taken from schools, kind of piggybacking on something that you said earlier, do you guys think that this constant censorship is going to deter people from wanting to become educators altogether?
Yes, I definitely think so. I've had some conversation with actually some students that are in college now at AT in the education program, that identify within the LGBT community, and they have the same fear. And it's also kind of limiting as like the conversations that you can have with your students. I think you touched on a point of just like community. Like if we look at what the world looks like, the world is not just white cis men. Like we have to be very realistic about that. So to only expose children to like the bare minimum of the population, I think that that's so limiting. And I think, yeah, it's definitely going to hinder a lot of people from being educators and wanting to be involved in just the school system in general, because they feel limited in the impact that they can have and the conversations that they can have and things like that.
I have something I'd like to say. As a student, I can like kind of suss out what other students are interested in doing, and education is not a popular option, fortunately. And like especially among my queer peers, it's like I don't think a lot of them would see it as an option really. And I have a friend in particular who's like, well, I probably have a very complex gender identity that I'm not willing to explore because I want to be a science teacher in North Carolina. And it's like, you shouldn't have to choose between your gender identity and your desire to be an educator. That is ridiculous. Yeah.
For such a beautiful start to the conversation. And one thing that we would like to do today is to bring the conversation out to you. And we'd like to invite you to get into small groups. And from Rainbow Collective for Change, is going to come up and get you all set up with some things to think about. A reminder, there is still food, so grab a snack for your conversation, and a restroom. There will probably be a line, and being mindful of the space. Y'all are amazing, and the panelists will be joining you in these conversations, and so you can ask them ongoing questions if you didn't have a chance to do that now. So I'd like to invite you up, and they will continue.